Welcome back to the workbench. For this video I'm continuing the build of the Airfix Spitfire FR.XIV in 1/48 scale. In the previous video I completed the cockpit of the aircraft, and in this episode I'll be finishing the main build of the model prior to starting the paint scheme. Hi, I'm Matt and you're watching Model Minutes. A quick shout out to my patrons. A massive thank you for all the support you give me. So today I'm making a start on the main build of this model. As always, adult supervision may be required during any model making due to the use of sharp tools and toxic paints and chemicals. I must reiterate that this kit was provided free of charge by Airfix for the purpose of review, so all opinions are my own. A big thank you to Airfix for giving me this opportunity. I began by assembling the reconnaissance camera. The parts were removed from the sprue and cleaned up. I then used Tamiya extra thin cement to glue them all together. I'm not too worried about the clear part becoming cloudy, as it's going to get painted. The frame for the camera had already been painted in Humbrol 78 Cockpit Green acrylic, whilst the camera assembly was carefully painted using Humbrol 85 Satin Black acrylic. I'm using a fine brush here to try and accurately place the paint. A few coats might be needed to get a good finish on the clear part. I removed a little paint from the rear of the cockpit assembly and then cemented the camera into place. The fuselage halves were snipped from their sprue and then cleaned up with a nail file. I hadn't realised that the projections on the side of the cockpit walls were actually flash. I thought they were locating lugs, but on test fitting the parts to the fuselage I realised the error of my assumption. I snipped these extra bits of plastic away and then cleaned up using a file and knife. The cockpit assembly can then be cemented inside one of the fuselage halves. The other half can then be sandwiched over the top and cement run along the seams. I did need to hold this in place until it had bonded together, but the parts do fit together quite well. The piece that fits on the nose is then glued in place. I did notice that it didn't fit quite right. It seemed slightly too narrow, but hopefully it won't be noticeable later. The various parts that make up the walls of the landing gear bay can now be added along with the clear part for the central light. You must take care to ensure you place the right part in the right place. They do fit well, however, and build up into quite a stable structure. You might be able to notice the marking of various holes in the lower half of the wing. This is due to the fact that this tooling is shared between various versions of the Spitfire in the Airfix range, some which I believe are available and others that will probably be released in the future. If you intend on installing the included slipper tank in the kit, you will have to open up the relevant holes at this stage. I decided that I didn't want to, so I just moved on. The fuselage is added to the lower wing and takes a little patience to get cemented into position. The wing tops need the ends cutting away. I did this following the moulded line with a sharp knife. I then cleaned up the rough edges with a nail file. The top wing surfaces are then cemented onto the lower surfaces. They are supposed to match up with the fuselage, but I had a little difficulty doing this on my kit. This may well require some filler and sanding later on to make this gap less noticeable. The tail surfaces come in two halves and needed gluing together. Having done this, they slot into their respective grooves and are cemented into place. You need to check that they don't droop over time whilst the glue dries though. The elevator components can then be added. I like that they come separately, as this allows you to position them in different ways, adding interest to your finished model. The rudder can then also be added to the model. It's worth noting that you get two different rudders in this kit, depending on the version you're going to paint, so make sure you use the right one. The ailerons are also separate parts, and it is now that they can be added. The central air intake comes in two halves, which are glued together then added to the correct position on the centre of the aircraft. The fairings on the nose of the aircraft can now be added. I'm not going to add the exhausts until the model has been painted though, to make it a little easier. The clear parts that cap the ends of the wings were then cemented into their correct slots. I like that they are clear, because that gives you the possibility to modify the build to add working lights if you have the technical know-how. I'm just going to paint mine though, so I'm using Tamiya extra thin cement to glue them on. The barrels for the cannons and machine guns can now be added. This is a little fiddly, and I found they wanted to droop, so watch out for that. The landing gear covers are cemented to the legs. They are quite well detailed and build up into quite a sturdy part. This can then be cemented into the relevant position on the model. You can depict the wheels raised if you wish, and parts are included in order to do that. Here I'm building the plug for the prop on the nose of the aircraft. If you're careful, the projecting pin part of the plug will turn freely, so that when the propeller is added, it will turn. This plug is then cemented into the hole in the nose and it fits quite well. Here I'm using a medium brush to paint the landing gear and bays in Humbrol Metal Coat polished aluminium enamel paint. You'll notice that some of the parts are still missing, such as the wheels and prop, which I'll paint separately and install at the end of the build. I also use this paint on the engine exhausts, and it is my intention to weather these up a bit towards the end of the series. The various parts which make up the air intakes and radiators under the wings have all been given a coat of paint before being assembled. This is due to the fact that I won't be able to reach them after I've glued them in place. The radiator parts are cemented inside the air intakes, and then the whole assembly is positioned in the correct grooves on the wings. You'll be able to notice that these grooves have also been given a coat of Humbrol 165 medium sea grey acrylic. And that is as far as I went with the main assembly of the Spitfire FR.XIV in 1/48 scale from Airfix. So overall, I feel as though the build is quite easy. The main problem I had was with the slightly odd fit between the top wing surfaces and the fuselage. I'm sure a little filler will help, but it begs the question, have I built it wrong to encounter this problem, or is this a bit of a common fault? Either way, that issue aside, I'm impressed with the level of detail and the overall ease of assembly. In the next video, I'll be making a start on the painting and decaling of the model. As always, let me know what you think of my build, techniques and progress so far, so leave a comment down below and don't forget that you can give me suggestions on other kits or videos you'd like to see too. All that's left to say is thanks for watching, and I'll see you all on the workbench again next time.